I realized that it's easy to talk about and get views and get reaction for stories on social media and the television media that are hyped up and trending, like this Stephon Clark shooting or the Devin Holmes shooting in Houston, Texas, or the shooting at YouTube. But it takes a degree of empathy to talk about issues that are not necessarily in the headlines and being hyped up and don't really get a lot of attention, but are just as important. Now, we have been talking a lot about the shootings that have occurred across the United States over the course of the past week. Tragic shootings, two of which involved unarmed black men. In one case at the hands of police, in one case at the hands of a crazy Iranian female, and in one case at the hands of a black hood rat thot. In every case, you have a example of mental illness, but you also have an example of just how far off the track our society has allowed its culture to travel. Because what you have is a inability to respect human life, an inability to make wise, logical judgments by understanding the difference between right and wrong, and an inability to separate reality from non-reality, as some people would term fiction. Now, I've made it my business to talk about the devaluing of black men, but also men as a whole, and how we are often belittled when we express our feelings and our thoughts if they're not politically correct and do not toe the party lines of, groupthink. And how, more importantly, black men, whether it's at the hands of a white cop or at the hands of some degenerate Negro, are falling out here like flies at an alarming rate. But upon scouring some of my familiar social network pages this morning as I got up and drank my coffee, I realized that there is another, what I call MCD, mass casualty demographic, in Black America and in the United States, other than black men. Because, see, I understood the hypocrisy of society that, calls for a 1 million man march on Washington, D.C., and, a campaign to, take down the NRA after a bunch of white school students and their teachers get massacred in a upper middle class suburban Florida high school. But this is the same society that was completely silent for years, since the late 70s, while black men were and still are getting slaughtered left and right in every major city, small towns, suburbs, all over America. And in understanding and recognizing that, I realized that there is another MCD, mass casualty demographic, in the black community. And no, it's not the black American female. Yes, she is murdered. I have made videos about the alarming rate of, somewhat physically attractive black females that are dying at the hands of their ex-boyfriends and husbands. But a majority of black females that are killed, as I just said, are killed, in domestic related incidents. And it's nowhere near on the percentage of black men who are getting killed just over the most trivial of things. Stepping on another dude's shoe, looking at another dude too long, brushing shoulders with somebody, one rival gang shooting up the set of another in retaliation for a shooting that happened that got one of their homies 2 days earlier, talking to a female in a club that some other Negro is jealous and was interested in, or flirting with a female that, another that was already with another Negro, talking back to and running from the police, cases of mistaken identity. I mean, any of a number of different issues that you can point to that remind you of who the true victims are of this immoral culture, this murderous, immoral, insensitive culture that we have allowed to develop over the course of the last 30 years in Black America. When was the last time you heard of a black female having somebody walk up on her and gun her down in a case of mistaken identity? Negroes get killed on accident by people who thought that they were somebody else that they were gunning for. That's just how insignificant the value of our lives seems to be. However, there's another disturbing trend. As I said, there's another MCD. There's another mass casualty demographic when it comes to heartless, merciless mass violence in America, and more specifically Black America. And that is the Black American child. Innocent little babies. And I'm not talking about, in every case, I'm not talking about, even 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, prepubescent teenagers or freshmen in high school. I'm talking about small children under the age of 5 years old, babies. You would not believe how many innocent babies are being failed at the hands of degenerates who birthed them, and at the hands of those that are shacking up with the degenerates who birthed them. See, this is why I don't want to hear anything from Black Lives Matter or anybody else about the shooting of some unarmed, so-called unarmed criminal that was breaking into cars or selling drugs or strong-arm robbing a gas station. Just like with the mentally and physically handicapped, like that autistic girl in Atlanta. Children are unable to, small children. Now, if they're 12, 13 years old, they may have a little bit better of a shot if no other thing, they can at least run for their lives. But small babies with small legs, small arms, they can't outrun their attackers. They can't outfight or fend off their attackers. They're innocent babies. They are getting murdered at an alarming rate in this country. And they're not getting murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. They're not getting murdered by neo-Nazis. They're not getting murdered by white nationalists on Stormfront. They're getting murdered by black, degenerate, hood Negroes and hood rats that really shouldn't even be allowed to have children. Now, admittedly, I am no fan of the idea of abortion. I'm no fan of the idea of sterilization or eugenics. I'm not a supporter, but I can understand the argument to be made when you have any civilization. It doesn't just have to be black people. Any uncivilized part of a civilization where you have an overabundance of mental illness, dangerous mental illness that puts people's lives at risk. Mental illness has been allowed to run rampant in these communities. I told you guys about how during the cause of the Prohibition era, what caused the Prohibition era back in the 1920s, I believe it was, right before the Great Depression. You know, how that, sparked the rise of, people like Al Capone, Frank Netto, Lucky Luciano, and all of those people. White men who were unable to find work and were, going to bars, getting drunk. There was a article that came out in the New York Times, and I believe that was the early 1920s. I don't know the exact details, but it went viral, as things go viral here nowadays on social media. And it was addressing the issue of the overabundance of men, but what they meant was white men that were walking off and leaving their families. Okay. This led to this article that went viral. It spread to other newspapers, and it started being talked about on radio stations. And then a congressional investigation began. And when that congressional investigation concluded, they determined that there was a concerning, unhealthy number of white men that were walking off, leaving their families, their wives and their children, due to, frustration over unemployment, and other issues. But what they did was they convened congressional meetings to decide how to stop this or how to prevent this, because legally there's no law saying that a man has to stay with his wife and children, just like there's no law saying that people can't cheat on each other in relationships. So what they did was they needed to find a scapegoat. And the scapegoat that they found was alcohol. Okay. So they decided, well, it must be strong drink the reason why these white men are walking off and leaving their children, because white men in their right mind, we don't walk off and leave our children. And keep in mind, these were men that were of the elite, that were worried about men, blue collar workers, men that they considered beneath them, but they shared the same skin color. So to them, it was a slap in their face. It was a spit in their face as white men, even elite, rich and elite white men, to read in the newspaper or hear on the radio that lower class white men were walking off and leaving their children and wives. So what they did was, over a course of time, they passed several laws that were dotted and signed, I believe, by Calvin Coolidge, who was the president at that time. And those series of laws were anti-alcoholic beverage referendums that combined came to be known as the Prohibition era. Now, one would ask, why did even the rich elite white men feel so strongly about the plight of white America to pass laws and deprive people of something that they so strongly desired? I mean, it would be equivalent to nowadays if they outlawed cigarettes, which they actually need to do. Because in spite of them feeling like they were above it all, in spite of them controlling the world's economy and laws, they still had a sense of racial pride. And they knew the damage, the long-term damage that would be done if this epidemic of white men walking off and leaving their wives and children would do to white America and the image of white people as a whole. Now you flash forward to the 1980s when the crack epidemic began, primarily in black inner city regions, and how so many Negroes became strung out on crack cocaine and alcohol. And now that generation of black people, their children have had children. And then they were hooked on welfare because they couldn't do anything for themselves. And what you see the end result in black America today. The Stavante Clarks, the Freddie Grays, the Michael Browns, the Egyptian trolls, and the plight of innocent black children. To show you how serious this situation is, I'm going to read for you 4 articles, verbatim, of incidents that have occurred that you never heard about and never would hear about if it wasn't for my channel, that just occurred this week involving innocent children in the so-called black community. This little angel is 3-year-old Bella Edwards of Queens, New York. Bella was found unconscious on Monday, April 2nd, and she was rushed to the hospital, but sadly she passed away. There were signs of abuse on her body. NYPD detectives have arrested the live-in boyfriend of Bella's mother. Authorities charged Mark Jenkins, 32, with second-degree depraved murder and first-degree depraved assault. Investigators believe Bella was forced to endure abuse at the hands of Jenkins. The medical examiner ruled she died of blunt force trauma to the stomach. Pix 11 reports that a source revealed that Bella was covered in bruises and had new injuries and several old injuries that were healing, and there were signs of possible sexual abuse. Bella's mom left their apartment at about 9 a.m. on Monday, and when she returned about 5 p.m., she found Bella unconscious in her bed. Jenkins was the only adult at the apartment with Bella and her 3-month-old brother for about 8 hours on Monday. Bella's mom wrote on social media, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you." She told the Daily News that Bella was a friendly, beautiful, affectionate, smart, and lovable, and the best daughter anyone can ask for. She was a very affectionate sister to her baby brother, Logan. She was loved by many who came to know her. Rest peacefully, baby girl. We wish we could have saved you. This is 5-month-old Jordan Algie Jr. of Mount Morris Township, Michigan. He died on March 25th, 2018, after suffering blunt force trauma to his vital organs. His mother's boyfriend, 19-year-old Rico Riggs, has been arrested and charged in connection with his death. Riggs said he flew into a rage and kicked Jordan after finding text messages in Jordan's mother's phone showing that she was texting her ex-boyfriends. According to authorities, Jordan's mother, 23-year-old Tamara Reed, left him home alone with Riggs and she went to the store. She left her phone behind and Riggs found text messages that made him angry. Riggs initially lied to police and told them Tamara's other child, her daughter Nyla, was responsible for Jordan's injuries. After giving several different accounts of his story, Riggs later admitted he kicked Jordan over text messages in Tamara's phone that showed she had been in contact with her ex-boyfriends. Quote, "I lost control, spazzed out, and kicked the baby," unquote, Riggs said. He also admitted to police he was mad because the exes had been over the house when he wasn't there. Jesus Christ. ABC News reports that when Tamara Reed returned home from the store, she found the baby injured and screaming. He was taken to hospital and died of his injuries. An autopsy showed his cause of death was blunt force trauma. Rico Riggs has been charged with felony murder, first-degree child abuse committed in the presence of another child, tampering with evidence, and intimidating witnesses. Tamara Reed was charged after authorities say she lied about Riggs' involvement in the murder. She was charged with tampering with evidence, lying to a police officer, conducting a violent crime investigation, being an accessory after the fact to a felony, and third-degree child abuse. This little angel is 4-year-old Nyla Jones of Miami, Florida. Nyla lost her life on Saturday, March 31st, when she was shot and killed by her uncle. Police say Nyla's uncle, Ronald Jones Jr., 24, opened fire on a car just before 10:20 a.m. Inside were Nyla, 2 other small children, and Nyla's aunt. Ronald Jones Jr. is charged with 1 count of second-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder with a deadly weapon. Jones left the scene and wrecked his car and later turned himself in to police. One of his sisters said that it was a tragic accident. She said she spoke to her brother Sunday morning to get his side of the story. He told her that he got into a fight over money with another sister, not Nyla's mother, and in the heat of the moment snatched a gun from his waistband to put it elsewhere, and it went off. He didn't even know the kids were in there, she said. He would have never done that on purpose. He loves his nieces and nephews. The 2 other children, Nyla's cousins, were grazed by bullets or glass and are okay according to police. Our thoughts are with Nyla's mother and loved ones. Rest well, baby girl. This little angel, 1-year-old Malaysia Robeson. Malaysia was sleeping on a couch last Thursday morning around 2 a.m. when bullets ripped through the house, killing her. The violence came after a social media feud, police said, but it's unclear what caused the feud and who was involved. Police said the dispute continued during a large fight in an East Side complex Wednesday night, later over the phone and again on social media, and then the shooting occurred early Thursday. Evidence markers on the home showed that at least 21 bullet holes. A window was shattered and bullets had punctured siding, another window, and the front door. 8 to 10 people, including another young child, were inside when the shooting started. Police said they believe a person got out of a vehicle and fired into the home. They do not believe the shooting was random, and they believe someone in the home was being targeted. An estimated 100 to 150 people marched on the city's east side Saturday morning to demand quick answers and justice for Malaysia. Our sympathies are with her loved ones. Rest well, baby girl. Now, over a course of less than a week, we have 4 adorable small babies children, little innocent children, murdered, brutally murdered. One was abused to death sexually and physically by a savage Negro in Queens, New York. Another one was kicked in the stomach, kicked to death in Mount Morris, Michigan, because the simp ass degenerate found out that the hood rat he was with was ghetto gagging on the private parts of other hood degenerates. In one case, you had a little girl that was killed by her own uncle because he was mad. The uncle was mad at his adult sister over an argument about money. So this dysfunctional savage, this dysfunctional degenerate gets so angry, he pulls a gun and opens fire on a car full of women and children that are his relatives, including his sister. And then the one that is just the trippiest of trip outs. Negroes going back and forth like they do here on YouTube over social fucking media. And some nut is so in their feelings, so just can't let it go. A argument over social media that they take a gun and they open fire on a house full of people and kill an innocent child. And in every one of these cases, we know that we are dealing with ghetto degenerates that have no self-control, no maturity, no sense of moral compass, really shouldn't have children around them, let alone giving birth to them and raising them. And all the perpetrators were black. Yet there's no CNN, no Jesse Jackson, no Al Sharpton, no Black Lives Matter. But of course, when I say that, that makes me a coon. These are innocent little babies. And you know what's scary? That was just this week. That was just in 1 week between March 25th and April 2nd, a couple of days ago. Just 1 week. Innocent babies, 4 of them, in 4 different states, murdered. These children are at the mercy of degenerate, mentally ill Negroes that should not even be allowed to have children, let alone rear them or have them in close proximity to themselves. A majority of black children are raised in single-parent homes in impoverished communities. And just like the mentally and physically handicapped and the elderly, they can't do anything to defend themselves. They are at the mercy. And mind you, a majority of them actually survive their childhood. They survive their childhood, but they experience so much mental and physical trauma that usually doesn't get reported. Most of this shit doesn't get reported to DCFS or the police. That by the time they grow up and approach their teens, they are as mentally deranged and fucked up as the people who were abusing them and their siblings, or abusing themselves or other adults in front of them. This is why I do not want to hear anything about Black Lives Matter. This is why I do not want to hear anything about white police shooting unarmed black people. These innocent little babies were unarmed. I don't want to hear anything about coons. I don't want to hear anything about slavery, Willie Lynch, Jim Crow. It's not the Ku Klux Klan. It's not Stormfront. It's not neo-Nazis that are murdering and slaughtering our innocent babies. It's other Negroes that look just like us, but clearly are not like us. As I have said time and time again, if you listen to the stories, in every one of these stories that I told you, there was a clear issue of insanity with the perpetrators. A Negro angry because his hood rat girlfriend is talking to and likely fucking some other Negroes. So instead of confronting and attacking her, he attacks her child. A situation where a man is angry at his sister over an argument about money. So he opens fire into a car with her and innocent little children. A situation where degenerates are going back and forth, bickering back and forth, like Mr. Carroll said, over social media. And one of them gets so worked up, they drive by the house of the other and empty an entire clip almost into the house and kill an innocent baby girl. I think we need to change the slogan of Black Lives Matter to Black Minds Matter. Because a majority of Negroes are clearly out of theirs. Talk to you later, guys.